So Eric, I know you've got a puppy under the desk. If puppy goes nuts at any moment in time, just know we'll keep rolling because I bet you people listening and just about all of us, wait.
They're tuning in for the puppy and not for me. Not for the two of us, Adam. Not to hear us talk, but for the puppy. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you know what, Erica, like this is a good example of how life is really unfolding as we're doing more and more from, virtually. Those that are fortunate enough to do that, whether it's someone at the door, kids coming home, or maybe you've got a project or a neighbor, who knows? Life is unfolding. So anyway, before I drift into it, Erica, first of all, just want to kick off by saying I hugely appreciate you jumping on. Today we're going to take on a big question. How do we consumerize performance management? And I'd like to give context to our audience, a couple minutes. But before I do, I was really reflecting on our discussions. I think this is our third or maybe fourth over a couple months. And you and I met just at that moment when consumerization of the employee experience kind of entered our world. And I said, hey, Erica, check this out. And you said, whoa. And I saw your eyes light up. So my question really isn't about consumerization, but when your eyes lit up, I could see the passion, and I know that the journey that you've been on. So I'm just curious, kind of what drives you, what keeps the fire going? Because not everyone that I talk to still has that fire. I think they did, and it faded with reality. What drives you?
That's a great question. The short answer is people. And I would say the consumerization of people initiatives is part of a broader umbrella, a part of a broader trend of HR transforming itself from a compliance-based function into a fully fledged strategic function that really puts the employee at the center of everything. And to be honest, that's the reason why I pivoted my career from the world of management consulting and corporate strategy and pivoted towards the people function, because I saw that trend. And for sure, now, I love how you are putting a name to it, and we're sort of detailing exactly what that trend means in practice. But kind of had, that gut feeling that function had so much potential and it was going in the right direction. And so that's the spark that you saw in my eyes, and that's the passion that drives me today.
I'm sure it will resonate with a number of our audience that have seen the same. Once you're exposed to the people challenges in the organization, like really exposed to the current state and even get a little drift of what's possible, you can't unsee it. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy or fast. We can testify to that. It's going to be a journey. But let me give a little context. We're now in season 2. Right. In season 2, one of our core anchor topics is how do we consumerize the employee experience? And the discussions are going, in some cases, all over the place. In some, they're starting to find some foundation or some roadmap. And the simplest way I've been able to explain the roadmap is there are 2 dots. On one side is the data dot. And then all the way on the other side is a nudge. The jury is out. If you're not thinking about nudges for how you communicate with your audiences, we're not saying the only way is a nudge. We're not saying nudge is the solution to all your problems, but it is part of communication similar to what happens in the world of consumers. As customers, we experience the world and brands in many ways as nudges. Now, when we think about consumerization of the employee experience, it's time to start to double click. What is an employee experience, right? In some ways, it's everything. Every touch point between you, whether it's when you were recruited, your first day, everything, all of it. Now, how do we take all of it, everything, and start to give it structure? Well, what is the employee journey? We understand there is an aspect when you're a candidate, then you're onboarding. With Erica, we picked an interesting topic that is obviously a huge part of the journey, which is performance management. Right? And in broadest terms, performance management used to be once a year, a grueling dental appointment. Don't mind dentists these days, but like in general, it's a difficult process. The managers would have to pause their lives, personal, professional. What did they do? The individual wouldn't sleep, the individual contributor for a couple of days until that moment. It was weird. We all recovered from it. That's not the future. So Erica, how do we consumerize performance management? What are we trying to accomplish with it?
I love how you you compare it to a dentist appointment, and I think there's a lot of truth in what you said, in the sense that performance management historically, and even today, at least what I feel is one of the scariest processes, one of the most even disliked, to be honest, because it's hard, because it takes sometimes some uncomfortable truths to be shared. It's not something that comes natural. It takes time, and on top of everything, the way that it's delivered today, exactly as you said, it's not exactly ideal. And so why to change it? Well, I think, there are a lot of areas of improvement. And I don't know if you hear my puppy, but he's starting to he's agreeing with what we're saying.
Perfect. If Papi agrees, we're on the right track.
Exactly, we're on the right track. And so so to your question, what are we trying to achieve? We're really trying to make this process better. We're really trying to make this process better for employees and ultimately for the company, because aligning the experience, improving the experience, aligning the incentives, makes this process better, not only for the individual contributor, for the people manager, but ultimately for the company. And so we're trying to link performance management to business outcomes at the end of the day. And by improving the employee experience, we can improve the performance overall in a couple of different ways. The first one is directly. Of course, people management, when it comes to performance management, it's possibly most intuitively linked with the company performance, right? You improve that process, you improve the employee performance, you improve the performance of the company. But there is also an indirect link, which is if you improve the process, and I think it's a lot of what we're trying to say, you make the experience better for the person, for the manager. And those people are going to be more engaged, they're going to be happier, their experience is going to be front and center. And we know that there is a clear link between higher engagement, higher performance, and increased business results. And so both the direct and the indirect link are both viable ways in which, what I'm trying to say is if you go down that route, you're going to improve the business outcome at the end of the day. And I think there's also a spillover effect in that if you once you fix the backbone of HR, at least what I like to refer, when I think of performance management, I like to think of it as a backbone of HR. You're ultimately having also spillover effect on other processes, right? Because you have more clarity on, okay, what I'm rewarding, what's the type of performance and employee behaviors that I want to incentivize. I have better clarity on that. I can, for example, recruit in a better way because of that understanding. And so there are many different virtuous cycle that can start on top of just improving the performance and ultimately business outcomes.
And let's connect that dot. We're talking about consumerization of the employee experience. To what end? It's important for us to say it's the pressure to consumerize in order to improve business outcomes. That must be said at the offset. So thank you. That's where we need to begin. Then we're saying within that, it's the performance management is the step in the journey. Cool. Within that, the audience are managers, right? We're right now because the managers is who receive the bulk of the challenges that are ahead for how to improve it. So let's play this. You and I talked about this as a movie. Like let's play this movie forward. What does the future performance management look like? And we have no constraints. We're not talking about technology limitations, budget limitations, resource mindshare. What does it look like?
Yeah, I think there are two characteristics that essentially define the future of performance management. The first one is it's going to be always on. It's going to be a system that consistently listens for actions and proactively gathers feedback, nudge people managers to take some actions, alert them or suggest next steps. And so it's going to be always on. There's not going to be a specific moment in the calendar year where we're going to officially do performance management. It's going to be always on. And the second aspect is that it's going to be highly customizable. To your point earlier around like putting the employee experience at the center, well, there is not a one size fits all, right? Different people managers will have different preferences, different employees will have different preferences, and so it's going to be highly customizable, and as a consequence it will automatically adapt to the preference of the end user. Now, we also spoke about maybe sharing a couple of examples, right, to bring this to life. And so I thought of a couple of examples. One, there is actually a positive situation, so it's like relatively easy, right? The employee is performing well, and how to manage that. And the second one is, well, maybe there are some challenges, and so how this system can help. In the first example, just to bring to life the always on and the highly customizable aspects of the performance management, let's say that, as a people manager, I have a person on my team, let's call her Emily, and she's great, and she just reached an important project milestone. Let's say that she just gave an important presentation as part of the project that she's working on. Now, automatically, the performance management system will trigger a notification to me as the people manager that will say, hey, Emily just reached this milestone. And by the way, automatically, I've sent nudges for gather feedback to all the relevant stakeholders who were part of the project and that presentation. And so as a manager, I already see that feedback being gathered. I already see what are the elements of strengths, what went well. And in this case, let's imagine that Emily did a great job. And with this idea of pulse checks and micro feedback, as a manager, I am able to get, always fresh picture of what's going on. And I can also share this feedback with the employee. And again, the customization comes into play. Knowing Emily's preference, knowing my preference as a manager, the system will automatically suggest me what to do, how to share that feedback. Maybe it's going to even craft a short text if that's the preference in terms of how the person wants to be nudged. Or it will suggest me to set up a meeting and automatically schedule it, maybe just with a click on my phone. And so in this way, we will always have very fresh and relevant insights in a way where, as a manager, I don't even have to worry to go out and gather, or is it the right moment? Who do I need to connect with? The system will do everything because it will listen to relevant milestone and will know what's going on. I see you nodding.
I'm flipping out. I could do cartwheels if I didn't have the headset on, because, you're really, when we think about abandoning the annual performance management for a manager, on one hand side, we removed a lot of stress. Cool. But on the other, now do it ongoing. What's my workflow? It's kind of like saying do accounting and finance ongoing, but there isn't a system, there isn't a process to empower you, to enable you. And you're saying, hold up. There is a moment of opportunity. Project is over. Recognition, feedback, right? What is possible? But for a manager to execute on these steps, first, they need to keep track. The project is over. Then enter a to-do on their list of many to-dos, and they have a number of folks that are reporting to them. Go solicit feedback. Whew! That's a process. Then go take that feedback, bring it together, notify the person, schedule 5 steps, 10 steps, 20 steps from the time the project is over until you provide that feedback. That is an entire task list for that manager to take on. So Erica, absolutely love that. So let's rewind a bit. How do we think about this process? You and I really connected around the idea of thinking from a product perspective, thinking about performance management as a product, and these are our users. So walk us through, how do we do this?
Right. So, it's really about putting the employees to the center, and there are different ways in which you would do that. Exactly, learning from the products, the consumer world. And so the first thing is exactly looking at what performance management means in the world of consumers, and learn from that. And so as an example, I spend maybe a long weekend at a Airbnb, and then I get on an Uber or Lyft to go to the airport, and I come back home, and it's late at night, and I just order from DoorDash and dinner at home. And those are all examples that have in common one thing, that is, after each interaction there's a quick pulse check. There's a quick feedback, which, that's performance management, right? I'm giving stars, I'm pushing buttons on like, what are the relevant dimensions that went well, or maybe didn't go as well in all those interactions. It's super quick. It's in the moment. And now imagine if, at the end of the year, I'm getting a request from Airbnb, from Uber, from DoorDash, and they're asking me, hey, would you mind like rating all the different stays, all the different drivers, all the different delivery people you've been you interacted with? Like, whoa, like I wouldn't even know where to start. And for sure there is a recency bias, right, that would come into place. Like there's a sense of overwhelm, which is what you said in terms of, wow, that's from a people manager perspective, that's crazy. And but there's also recency bias, like how good my feedback is going to be in reality, right? It's not going to be that great. It's not going to be that accurate. And so now this is, of course, a bit of a stretch, and you know where I'm going in terms of comparing this with what we do in companies. But it is, just to say, it is a little bit crazy what we do right now compared to what we ask consumers to do, which is much more light and intuitive. And so the first thing is like learn from the what performance management means and how it's adopted in the consumer world. The second thing is it's really thinking at performance management as a product. And so do the things that you would do when developing a product, right? So right now there is a push approach, like I have this process and everyone must use it. But let's switch the mindset and move to a pull approach. Let's make it employee-centric, focus on the employee experience. What do I need to do? How do I need to shape this experience so that people will want to use it, will want to go through this process? And so solicit feedback, test and learn, have an agile approach the same way that you would do when developing a product. The third element that I want to share is the concept of personas, which I'm sure we're all familiar with when we think about consumers, right? You segment, and we know that there is not a one size fits all. But when it comes to HR processes, that's not such a widespread concept. And so why don't we use those as well when delivering the process of performance management? Let's map our employees. Let's understand what differentiates them, what different cohorts may like or dislike. And going back to my example, like, does Emily prefer to meet in person very, very often, or she rather likes to receive texts, and that's good enough for her, and that's the best way for her to learn. So employee experience is number one, and by segmenting and delivering a slightly different experience, we can achieve better results. And the last aspect is really increasing the focus on the experience thanks to technology, and thanks to really developing people managers in that way. And I know it's hard, but again, technology does come does come in handy in this sense, because technology that it's always on, that continuously nudges, with how-to videos or whatever templates that are customizable, like it really helps the people manager really deliver the experience, so they don't have to start from scratch.
Reflecting on a couple things, and I want to double click on one, but first just a quick reflection. You really nailed it for me when you said, hey, if at the end of the year Uber or Airbnb was like, hey, remember 9 months ago you had that ride when you visited Vegas, how was that driver? How was that experience, right? I mean, impossible. And arguably, you are going to, there's all kinds of biases introduced when you do it once a year or you do it, in increments. You're biased by the most recent experiences you've had too. And then the other thing, when we talk about knowledge and how it can, technology and how that could enable the nudges, you really think about how busy managers are. And that example that you gave with the recognition for a finished project, the next series of questions could be, well, when do you deliver the nudge to them? Maybe it isn't when the project is over. Maybe you wait for when they have time. Maybe you put on a calendar for them to take a moment to reflect on these things. And then when we talk about personas, really by looking at data, you can now segment further and deeper. You can look at it as managers or managers within a certain function or managers working from home or remotely or in office or hybrid. But then is it high-performing managers versus low-performing managers? Do you want to ask a low-performing manager to recognize good work and solicit feedback? Don't know. Not saying yes or no, but maybe there's a different process or a different nudge where you say, hey, the way to do this. So first you have sent a nudge on how to remind them on what the process is, how to give this kind of feedback, or maybe the importance of recognition. The importance of recognition of good work by your team members and what it does to influence their performance. Just fascinating. My mind just goes straight into, what are all the possible ways how we can improve that performance. But I think in the broad strokes, it'd be really interesting to think about characteristics of the future of performance management, kind of in the way we're talking about it as a product. Right? What are the big things that the folks that are listening to that are scratching their heads and saying, you know what, I think I want to really consider this. How would you put into big buckets for them to think about this new state?
The first one that I would start with, and maybe just because it's the fresh and I already mentioned it, it's the being powered by technology. Like really, technology will help with this ongoing in the moment, listening, feedback, nudges to, also increase insights. Technology will help de-bias the process, make it not just based on recency bias, but really all-encompassing, and will also enable that customization, right, that we were talking about, so that it's as seamless as possible from the perspective of the end user and easy to use. The second bucket is it's going to be holistic, and this has to do a lot with shifting dynamics, shifting expectations. We're not working and living in a world where we only care about the quota being, hit, the number being met, but we really look at 360. Is this employee, developing the right soft skills? Is this employee, not burning out and maintaining well-being? So what I'm trying to say is that it's going to be holistic in that there will be not just an individual work component, but also a personal component. And I'll share more than that. Another trend that we're seeing is work becoming more and more project-based and team-based. And so there's going to be also a team component, right? And so it's going to be layered. It's going to be holistic in that sense. And the third bucket is it's going to be based on skills. We are seeing what are being called like butterfly careers as a new trend compared to more linear careers where you would stay in the same line of business for a long time. And we're seeing this idea of a talent marketplace that will replace, right, the way of doing business, which is really much in line with what I was mentioning about the project-based approach to work. And so the feedback, the coaching, the insights will be a lot about skills that are transferable and that really enable not just to get to, from manager to senior manager, but to maybe one line of business to another in a way where transferable skills will really be the way to build this butterfly careers.
That level of workplace agility, when we stop thinking about it even linear in a function, but cross-functional with almost no limitations to what's possible, how do we enable our managers to be able to deal with that in the performance management structure that is looking after the best interest of the organization, right, and the outcomes of the organization? Erica, Fascinating, just fascinating topic. Where I'd like to go next is a question that is just a real mess. So I'm not looking for you to have the answer. I know it's messy. When we think about this consumerization of the performance management, and we think about what function should, I don't want to say the word own it anymore, what functions should partner for this reality, this future to be manifested? Is this a HR plus technology plus communications or marketing? Because nudges are now really, how do you write the nudges? How do you make them relevant and timely? Reminders, right? We're entering a whole new world when we're moving from performance management to this world of the future, of what we just discussed. I mean, it's not going to be simple, right? It makes sense, but how do we do it? Who should be involved?
I think all the names that you mentioned make sense. So those are the ones that would come in mind as well. For sure, the people function, given the process itself, the tech function in terms of enabling comms, marketing, in terms of helping, right? There's a lot that HR can learn from marketing in that sense, like some of the concept that we talked about, right? And so learning how to better segment, how to write the nudges, like how to make them compelling. But I would also say it's really also a partnership with the business more broadly, because what I see, at least from a HR perspective, is one of the biggest challenges of performance management is seen as a check the box, right? Is seen as we must do it because HR asks us to do it, essentially. Now, I'm getting a bit of an extreme here, but that's a little bit more the cynical view, right? But what if we, going back to maybe the first question that you asked me in terms of like why we're doing this, how to make this relevant, it's really partnering with the business and really looking for the business outcomes that this improved process will produce. And so in that way, having that strong partnership, this process is not going to be, it's an HR process, but it's really going to be, it's a company-wide process. We're all in this. We're all in this together. It makes sense from a business perspective. It's the right thing to do, not just by our employees, but also by the company. And so we see the point in doing this, and we see the value.
That's awesome. You didn't even take a pause. That one wasn't a hard one for you. Well, let's see if the following, if I can elevate the difficulty of the question. So the folks that are listening, I refer to them as agents of change. They're on this journey. They see it. They're inspired by it. Like you said in the beginning of our discussion, right? Why do you have the light in your eyes and the spark? Is because you see the opportunity to do some good. It will have broad impact. And these agents of change are in various functional areas that are looking at this conversation. We've got marketing, operations, technology, and we said this will need to be a broad stakeholder group that's going to need to come together. Here's the next thing that I've been scratching my head over. If I was to give advice to agents of change on how do you know who are the right folks that will get it, that are going to be good partners to you, not just based on their function, but on their mindset. Because I think in a lot of, especially larger enterprises, there are some folks in their positions, not because they're the most inspiring. And as a result, this is not the type of initiative that they would, until it matures a bit. So early adapters, what would be some of the characteristics that we can think about of what makes a good potential internal stakeholder that would join this early on? That
is a hard question, Adam.
Yes, there it is. We got one. We got a difficult one.
No, all of these are very difficult. This one is, it's very challenging. So a couple of ideas that comes to mind. The first one is there might be some part of the business where, there's naturally people, go there because of a certain mindset, of a certain skill set, of a certain approach. And so those will probably be the most cutting edge part of your company where, going back to what we're saying about, the agile approach, test and learn. So maybe going in, those teams in your product organization, in your tech organization, wherever they may sit, where already they have that mentality. And so probably they're going to be more open to try and experiment and actually be very excited to apply certain insights into a different area of the business compared to what they usually do. That would be one. The second thing, well, this is more something that I do, is inquiring and listening. So really maybe asking the question and listen to the response. I find that a lot of the time I learn more from what it's not said rather than what it is said, right? And so to your point, there might be people in position of power, but maybe, when asked about, hey, so how do you think, what are your priorities, what's top of mind, where do you feel we should shift and evolve things, listen to what they're saying, but also what they're not saying, right? And so in that sense, you can infer a little bit of their mindset and their propensity to risk and test and learn and really introduce some novelty into, for example, the performance management process, but not only that, of course. Those are a couple of ideas. And in general, my advice would be, if, once you try to identify those, and if you want to maybe bring along people who may be on the fence, is start small, try to do a bit of a pilot, gather the data, build a business case for why what you have right now, it's not working. Test it. Maybe you have a manager or like a head of a division who is willing to pilot something different for the the upcoming quarter, and try to share early findings. And so that would be a good way to start bringing people along in the journey, even if maybe the first time you talk to them, they're not super excited, but the second one, if you have a little bit more data, a little bit of a pilot of track record, they were on the fence and now they're on your side. So step by step, that would be also my advice.
Awesome. In many ways, this resembles how we would think about a launch of a product. Like it's find early adapters.
Yes.
Create a pilot that you can learn and build a case for it. And the early adapters inside organizations are going to be based on, are they open-minded? Do they have a burning platform that they need to solve, like the problem big enough that deserves the lift? Erica, this has been an awesome. I think we could do this for hours, no doubt, for days. There's so much to discuss, but I appreciate you jumping on. I appreciate the time, the brilliance, and for you being a part of this movement. I look forward to our next chat.
Thank you. I'm very excited and looking forward to our next chat as well.
Wonderful. Over and out, Erica.
Take care. Bye.